Tonight, you're embarking on a sacred journey that Zen masters have walked for centuries, a path that transforms the restless spirit into tranquil repose. I invite you to discover ancient wisdom woven through gentle stories, each one a doorway leading from the chaos of daily life into the sanctuary of deep, healing sleep. These tales carry within them a special medicine, one that dissolves the barriers between you and the peace that has always been your birthright. What makes this evening unique is that these teachings require nothing from you except your willingness to listen. Whether your mind feels like scattered leaves in the wind, whether sleep has become a distant memory, or whether you've tried countless remedies without relief, these stories will find you exactly where you are. The great Zen teacher Huang Po once said, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." Tonight, you'll learn to see with the eyes of wisdom, and in that seeing, find the rest you seek. As we move through tales of mountain hermits, flowing rivers, and moments of sudden understanding, you'll notice something beautiful beginning to unfold. The weight you've been carrying will start to lift. Your breath will deepen naturally. And layer by layer, you'll discover the profound stillness that lives beneath all the noise. So settle yourself now with loving care. Let your body find its most comfortable position, releasing into the support beneath you. Close your eyes gently, like curtains being drawn at the end of a long day. Take this moment to breathe deeply and know that everything you need for perfect rest already lives within you. Let me tell you about a tea master who lived in a small village long ago. This man was known for making the most perfect tea in all the land. People would travel for days just to taste what he could create with simple leaves and hot water. One morning, a very important man came to visit. He wore fine clothes and carried many books under his arm. He knocked on the tea master's door and said, "I have come to learn your secrets. I know everything about tea already, but I want to know what makes yours so special." The tea master smiled gently and invited the man inside. They sat on simple mats on the floor. The tea master brought out his favorite cup and placed it in front of his guest. "Please," said the visitor, "before you start, let me tell you what I already know." And he began to talk. He spoke about different types of tea leaves. He talked about water temperature. He explained brewing times and serving methods. He shared stories of famous tea masters from history. He went on and on, barely stopping to breathe. The tea master listened quietly. When the visitor finally paused, the tea master picked up his teapot and began to pour. The hot tea flowed into the cup, filling it to the rim. But he didn't stop pouring. The tea overflowed onto the table. It spilled onto the floor. Still, he kept pouring. "Stop!" cried the visitor. "Can't you see the cup is full? No more tea can go in." The tea master set down his pot and looked at his guest with kind eyes. "Yes," he said softly, "just like this cup, you are already full. Full of ideas, full of knowledge, full of what you think you know. How can I teach you anything new when there is no room left inside you?" The visitor sat in silence. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. "Come back tomorrow," said the tea master, "but next time, bring an empty cup." That night, the visitor couldn't sleep. He thought about his life, his mind, his heart. He realized he had been carrying so much for so long. Opinions about everything, judgments about everyone, worries about tomorrow, anger about yesterday. His mind was like a room stuffed so full that he couldn't even open the door. The next morning, he returned. This time, he said nothing. He simply sat and waited. The tea master poured again. This time, the tea stayed in the cup. The visitor tasted it, and tears came to his eyes. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. Not because the tea was different, but because finally, there was space inside him to receive it. This is the first lesson of deep rest. Before sleep can come, before peace can enter, we must make space. We must empty our cups. Right now, as you lie here, notice what you're carrying. Feel the weight of today's conversations still echoing in your mind. Sense the tomorrow that hasn't happened yet, but already takes up room in your thoughts. Feel the old hurts you've been holding, the plans you've been making, the problems you've been trying to solve. All of this is like tea in an overflowing cup. There's no room for anything new, no room for rest, no room for peace. But here's the beautiful truth. You don't have to fight these things to empty your cup. You don't have to push them away or pretend they don't exist. You simply have to stop holding them so tightly. Take a breath with me now. As you breathe in, imagine gathering up all the thoughts, all the worries, all the noise in your mind. Hold them gently, like water in your cupped hands. Now, as you breathe out, let them flow away. Not because they're bad, but because right now you're choosing something different. You're choosing to be empty so you can be filled with rest. Let your shoulders drop. They've been holding up so much. Let them release their burden. Feel your jaw soften. It's been clenched around words you wanted to say or wished you hadn't said. Let it go loose now. Your hands have been gripping, even in rest. Open them now, palms up, like empty cups waiting to receive. Your whole body can become like that empty cup, ready, open, willing. The tea master knew something that most people forget. Emptiness isn't nothing. Emptiness is everything waiting to happen. It's space for new breath, room for fresh thoughts, a place where peace can finally settle. In Zen, they call this beginner's mind. It's the mind that doesn't already know how everything should be. It doesn't have opinions about every little thing. It doesn't carry yesterday into today or pull tomorrow into now. It's simply here, open, like morning sky. As you rest here now, practice being like that empty cup. When a thought comes, and they will come, don't fight it. Just notice it, like noticing tea being poured. If the thought wants to stay and fill you up with worry or planning, gently tip your cup. Let it flow through and away. Thank you, thought, you can say silently. But right now, I'm practicing being empty. This isn't about stopping your mind. It's about changing your relationship with what your mind does. You become the cup, not the tea. The space, not what fills it. The stillness, not the movement. The visitor learned something that changed his whole life. He discovered that he had been so busy being full that he'd forgotten how to receive. So busy talking that he had forgotten how to listen. So busy knowing that he had forgotten how to wonder. And in that emptiness, that openness, that space he created, something beautiful could finally enter. Not just the taste of perfect tea, but perfect peace. Your cup is ready now, empty and waiting. Rest can flow in like warm tea on a cold morning. Sleep can settle like mist on still water. And all the fullness you really need, love, peace, deep healing rest, can finally find a home in you. Let yourself be empty now. Let yourself be ready. Let the next breath be the first sip of the peace you've been seeking. The Tea Master's greatest teaching was this: when you are truly empty, you become truly full. When you carry nothing, you can receive everything. When you know nothing, you can learn anything. Tonight, you are the empty cup, and everything you need is already being poured. But let me share with you what happened to the visitor in the days that followed, because his story teaches us even more about the way of the empty cup. When he returned home to his big house filled with books and treasures, everything looked different. The rooms that once felt impressive now felt heavy. The shelves packed with knowledge now seemed like walls blocking out the light. He realized he had been living like his overflowing teacup, so full there was no room for life to surprise him. He began to practice what the Tea Master had shown him. Each morning, instead of immediately filling his mind with plans and worries, he would sit quietly for a few minutes. He would imagine his mind as an empty cup, ready to receive whatever the day wanted to offer. At first, this felt strange. His mind was used to being busy, used to being full. Thoughts would rush in like water, trying to fill every empty space. But he learned to be patient with himself. When his mind filled up with chatter, he would gently remind himself, "I am practicing being empty." He discovered that emptiness wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was like standing in a quiet field at dawn, when the air is fresh and full of possibility. When his cup was empty, he could taste his food fully. He could really hear what people were saying. He could see the beauty that had always been around him, but that he had been too full to notice. His friends began to ask what had changed. They noticed he listened more and talked less. They saw that he didn't always have to be right about everything. When someone shared a problem, instead of immediately offering advice, he would simply be present with their pain. And somehow, that empty presence helped more than all his clever words ever had. The Tea Master had taught him something that seems backwards, but is deeply true. When you try to hold everything, you end up holding nothing real. When you try to know everything, you stop learning. When you try to control everything, you lose the magic of surprise. As you rest here now, you too can practice this ancient wisdom. Feel how your body naturally wants to let go. Your muscles don't need to hold their shape so firmly. Your breathing doesn't need to be managed or controlled. Your heartbeat knows its rhythm without your help. This is what the empty cup teaches us about sleep. Sleep isn't something you can force or fill yourself with. Sleep comes when you stop trying so hard. It arrives when you make space for it, when you become receptive rather than active. Think of a flower opening to receive morning dew. The flower doesn't work to get the dew. It simply opens, and the dew settles naturally into its petals. Your body knows how to receive rest in the same way. But first, like the flower, you must be willing to open. Let your breath become like that flower. Each inhale opens you gently. Each exhale lets something unnecessary fall away. You don't have to decide what to keep and what to let go. Your body's wisdom knows. Trust it. The visitor learned to trust this wisdom too. He discovered that an empty cup isn't weak or lacking. It's ready. It's available. It has infinite potential because it isn't already committed to being something else. When you empty your cup, you're not losing anything important. You're making room for what matters most. You're choosing space over clutter, presence over noise, being over doing. Right now, as sleep begins to call to you, practice the way of the empty cup one more time. Let your thoughts be like tea that has been poured out. Let your worries flow away like water down a gentle stream. Let your plans for tomorrow wait outside your door like patient friends who know they'll be welcome in the morning. Your cup is becoming beautifully empty now, ready for the sweet tea of dreams, ready for the nourishing drink of deep rest, ready for the perfect peace that comes when there's finally room for it to settle. The tea master's final lesson was this: the empty cup is never truly empty. It's full of space, full of possibility, full of readiness to receive whatever gift the moment wants to offer. And the greatest gift it can receive tonight is the blessing of deep, healing sleep. Your cup is ready, your heart is open, and rest is already being poured. Years later, the visitor became a teacher himself, but he never forgot the lesson of the empty cup. When students came to him, eager and full of their own ideas, he would smile and remember his first meeting with the tea master. He learned to recognize the signs of an overflowing mind, the rushed speech, the need to interrupt, the inability to sit still, the constant planning and worrying. He had once carried all of these burdens himself. To these students, he would offer the same gift the tea master had given him. Not more knowledge, but less. Not more to carry, but permission to set things down. Not answers, but better questions. What would happen, he would ask them gently, if you knew nothing for just 5 minutes? What would you discover if your mind had space to breathe? Some students resisted this teaching. They wanted techniques and methods. They wanted something to add to their collection of knowledge. But the wise ones understood. They saw that the most powerful teaching was not about gaining something new, but about releasing what was old and heavy. As you drift towards sleep now, you carry this same wisdom. You understand that rest comes not from adding more comfort or trying harder to relax, but from letting go of what prevents relaxation in the first place. Your body knows how to sleep. It has known since you were born. But sometimes the mind gets so full, so busy, so convinced it needs to stay awake and figure everything out, that it forgets how to step aside and let the body do what it does naturally. Tonight, you remember. Tonight, you practice the ancient art of the empty cup. And in that emptiness, that beautiful space you've created, sleep can finally come home to you. The tea is poured, the lesson is complete, and you are ready to receive the deepest rest you've ever known. Now that you have learned to make space within yourself, let me share another story about finding your center, your place of deep calm that cannot be shaken. High in the mountains, where the air is thin and the world grows quiet, there lived a young monk who could not find peace. He had left the busy city below, thinking that distance would bring him stillness. But even in his small hut on the mountainside, his mind raced like wild horses. Every morning, he would sit to meditate, but thoughts would crash through his awareness like storms. Worries about his family and the village, doubts about his path, fears about the future, plans that needed making, problems that needed solving. the silence of the mountain only seemed to make the noise in his head louder. For months, he struggled this way. He tried different breathing techniques. He counted his breaths. He repeated sacred words. Nothing worked. His mind remained as restless as the wind that whipped around the peaks. One day, feeling defeated, he decided to give up his practice altogether. "I am not meant for this peaceful life," he thought. "Some people are just too restless for stillness." As he packed his few belongings, preparing to return to the chaos of the city, he noticed something. The great mountain that rose behind his hut had been there every single day, but he had never really looked at it, really seen it. He stopped packing and walked outside. The mountain stood before him, massive and silent. Snow covered its peak like a white crown. Its sides were dark stone, carved by wind and weather over countless years. And it was completely, utterly still. The monk sat down on a rock and watched the mountain. A fierce wind began to blow, bending the trees and rattling his hut. But the mountain didn't move. Rain came next, heavy drops that turned to sleet. The mountain remained unchanged. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by thunder that echoed between the peaks. Still, the mountain stood as it had for thousands of years. "How do you do it?" the monk asked aloud. "How do you stay so calm when everything around you is chaos?" Of course, the mountain didn't answer with words, but as the monk sat there, watching, listening, something began to shift inside him. He realized that the mountain wasn't fighting the storm. It wasn't trying to stop the wind or push away the rain. It simply let the weather happen around it while remaining itself. The storm passed, as storms always do. The sun came out. Birds began to sing. And through it all, the mountain had not moved even slightly. It had not been disturbed. It had not lost its peace. "I understand now," whispered the monk. He had been trying to stop his thoughts, to fight his restless mind, to push away every distraction. But the mountain taught him something different. You don't have to stop the storm. You just have to stop being moved by it. That evening, he sat to meditate again. But this time, when thoughts came rushing through his mind like wind through the trees, he didn't fight them. He became like the mountain, solid, grounded, unmoving. The thoughts came anyway. Worries still visited, plans still formed. But now he was the mountain, and these were just weather passing by. They could blow and rage all they wanted. He remained still. As you rest here now, you too can learn from this mountain. Feel the weight of your body against the bed, like the mountain's base rooted deep in the earth. You are solid. You are stable. You are supported. Your mind might still be active, thoughts moving like clouds across the sky. That's perfectly natural. You don't need to stop them or fight them. You only need to remember that you are not the weather. You are the mountain. Let your breathing become deep and steady, like the mountain's ancient rhythm. Mountains don't rush. They don't hurry. They exist in their own perfect time, unbothered by the speed of the world around them. The monk learned to find this mountain-like stillness, not just during meditation, but throughout his day. When difficult emotions arose, he would remember the mountain in the storm. When others spoke to him with anger or frustration, he remained like the mountain, present, listening, but not blown about by their weather. He discovered that being like the mountain didn't make him cold or distant. Instead, It made him a place of refuge for others. People began to seek him out, drawn to his calm presence. They found that being near him helped them feel more peaceful too. "How did you become so steady?" they would ask him. "I learned from my teacher," he would say, gesturing toward the great peak that rose behind his hut. The mountain taught him that true strength isn't about being hard or rigid. It's about being so deeply rooted that you can't be shaken. It's about being so solidly yourself that the storms of life can rage around you without moving you from your center. This is what sleep requires from you now. Not that you stop all thoughts or feelings, but that you find your inner mountain. The part of you that is always at rest, always at peace, no matter what weather passes through your mind. Place one hand on your chest now. Feel the steady beating of your heart. This rhythm has been with you since before you were born. It knows how to keep perfect time without your help. It is like the mountain, reliable, constant, trustworthy. Your heart is beating whether you're worried or calm, whether you're thinking or quiet, whether you're awake or asleep. It doesn't change its rhythm based on the weather in your mind. It simply beats, steady and strong, like the heart of the mountain itself. Let your breathing match this mountain rhythm. Slow and deep. No rush. No effort. Just the natural rise and fall, like the mountain breathing with the seasons. The monk realized something else about mountains. They are shaped by time and weather, but so slowly that the changes can't be seen. A mountain doesn't resist the wind and rain completely. It lets them carve beautiful valleys and create gentle slopes. But this happens gradually, patiently, without struggle. This is how change happens in a peaceful mind too. Not through force or fighting, but through gentle persistence. Like water slowly wearing smooth stones, peace comes to those who practice being like the mountain, steady, patient, allowing. You don't have to become perfectly calm tonight. You don't have to stop every thought or solve every problem. You only have to remember that beneath all the activity of your mind, there is something in you that is already as still as the ancient peaks. That stillness is your birthright. It's not something you have to earn or achieve. It's already there, waiting for you to notice it, like the mountain was always there waiting for the monk to really see it. Feel that stillness now in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. This is your mountain nature. This is your unshakable center. This is the place where deep rest lives. The storms in your mind may continue for a while. Let them. You are the mountain now, and mountains are not disturbed by weather. They simply stand in their ancient wisdom, rooted and calm, while everything else passes by like clouds in an endless sky. Tonight, you rest in mountain peace, deep, solid, and perfectly still. The monk spent many years living with this mountain wisdom. He watched the seasons change around him, saw spring snows melt into rushing streams, witnessed summer thunderstorms and autumn winds. Through it all, the mountain remained his greatest teacher. In winter, when snow piled deep around his hut and the world seemed frozen and harsh, he would look at the mountain wearing its white cloak with such grace. The mountain didn't complain about the cold. It didn't struggle against the weight of snow. It simply held it all with steady strength, knowing that spring would come in its own time. This taught the monk patience with his own difficult seasons. when sadness came to visit his heart, when loneliness felt heavy on his shoulders, when doubt clouded his mind like winter fog, he would remember the mountain in winter, strong enough to hold whatever weather came, knowing that all seasons pass. In spring, he watched the snow melt and flow down the mountain sides in countless small streams. The mountain gave its winter burden back to the earth gladly, without holding on. Fresh green appeared on the lower slopes as life returned to what had seemed dead. The monk learned to let his own frozen places melt too. Old hurts that had been held tight like ice in his heart began to soften and flow away. Rigid ideas about how life should be started to loosen, making room for new growth. Summer brought wildflowers to the mountain meadows, painting the slopes in colors so bright they made the monk laugh with joy. Even the stern stone face of the mountains seemed to smile, decorated with nature's celebration. The monk saw that mountains weren't only about stillness and strength. They could also hold beauty, joy, and abundance without losing their essential nature. This helped him understand that being like a mountain didn't mean never feeling happiness or excitement. It meant being rooted enough that joy could bloom naturally without becoming attachment, that pleasure could visit without becoming craving. Autumn was perhaps the most teaching time of all. The monk would watch the trees on the mountain slopes turn gold and red, then release their leaves one by one. The mountain held all of this letting go with such tenderness. It didn't try to keep the leaves from falling. It simply provided the space for this natural release, and then received the fallen leaves back into its soil. The monk practiced this same gentle letting go. When thoughts arose in meditation, he learned to let them fall away like autumn leaves. When feelings came and went, he held them lightly, knowing they too would return to the earth of his being when their time was complete. Years passed this way. The monk's hair grew grey, then white. His face became lined like the weathered stone of the mountain. But his eyes held the same deep peace he saw in the mountain's eternal gaze. Other monks began to come to learn from him. They expected complicated teachings, secret techniques, special wisdom. Instead, he would simply point to the mountain. "Sit with this teacher," he would tell them. "Everything you need to know about peace is written in its silence." Some visitors were frustrated. They wanted words, explanations, methods they could take away and practice. But the patient ones stayed. They learned to sit quietly and watch. And slowly, like the mountain itself, the understanding would grow in them. One young monk complained, "But the mountain doesn't do anything. How can it teach us?" The old monk smiled. "Exactly," he said. "The mountain teaches by being. You try to find peace by doing. Watch the mountain long enough, and you'll remember that you don't have to do anything to be peaceful. You already are peaceful, underneath all the doing." As you lie here now, let yourself sink deeper into this mountain teaching. Feel how your body naturally wants to be heavy and still, like stones settled into the earth over countless years. You don't have to work to make this happen. Your body knows how to rest, just like the mountain knows how to stand. Notice how your breath wants to slow down and deepen, like the long, patient breathing of the earth itself. Mountains breathe too, but so slowly we can't see it. Their breath is measured in seasons, in years, in centuries. Let your breath become vast and slow like this. Your heartbeat is like the deep pulse of the mountain's core, steady, reliable, ancient. It has been beating since you were born, and it will continue until your time here is complete. Trust this rhythm. It knows what it's doing. Even your thoughts can become mountain-like now. Instead of quick, scattered, urgent thoughts, let them be slow and spacious. Like clouds forming and dissolving around a peak, thoughts can arise and pass away without hurry, without force. The mountain taught the monk that there is a difference between being asleep and being at rest. Sleep comes and goes, but rest, true rest, is always available. It's the deep stillness that underlies all activity, the peace that exists whether you're awake or dreaming. This is mountain consciousness. This is the awareness that watches all weather without being disturbed by any of it. This is what you are, beneath all the stories about who you think you are. Let yourself be this mountain now. Ancient, patient, deeply rooted in something that cannot be moved. Let sleep come to you like snow settling on peaks, like morning mist gathering in valleys, like starlight blessing stone. You are the mountain. You have always been the mountain, and mountains know how to rest in perfect stillness until dawn comes again. There is another way to find peace, different from the mountain's stillness, but just as profound. Let me tell you about a master who discovered this by sitting beside flowing water for 7 years. This master had spent decades trying to control his mind, fighting his thoughts, pushing away difficult feelings. He had practiced on mountaintops and in caves, seeking the perfect silence. But something was always missing. His peace felt rigid, like a dam holding back a flood. And sometimes the dam would crack, and all his careful control would wash away in moments. One day, walking through a forest, he came upon a river. It wasn't a dramatic, rushing torrent. It was simply a gentle stream, flowing around rocks, under fallen logs, between the roots of old trees. Something about its movement caught his attention, and he sat down on the bank to watch. The water never stopped moving, yet it seemed completely at peace. It didn't fight the rocks that blocked its path. Instead, it flowed around them, over them, sometimes under them. When the riverbed narrowed, the water moved faster. When it widened, the water slowed, but it never stopped flowing. This is strange, thought the master. I have always believed that peace comes from being still, but this water is constantly moving, and yet it seems more peaceful than any meditation I have ever achieved. He decided to stay and learn from the river. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Through spring floods and summer droughts, through autumn leaves falling onto the surface and winter ice forming at the edges, he watched and learned. The first lesson the river taught him was about resistance. A large boulder had fallen into the stream long ago, right in the middle of the current. The master expected the water to be frustrated, to fight against this obstacle. But instead, the river simply divided around the boulder, flowing on both sides, then joining together again downstream, as if nothing had happened. The river doesn't see the boulder as a problem, the master realized. It doesn't waste energy trying to move it or wish it weren't there. It simply finds a way to continue flowing. He began to apply this wisdom to his own mind. When difficult thoughts arose, instead of fighting them, he practiced flowing around them. When painful emotions surfaced, Instead of pushing them down, he let them be part of his stream while continuing to move forward. The second lesson came during the rainy season, when the river swelled and moved much faster than usual. The master worried that the peaceful quality would be lost in all this turbulence. But as he watched more carefully, he saw that even in the rushing current, the water maintained its essential nature. It was still flowing, still finding its way, still moving with purpose toward the sea. The river teaches me that I can be peaceful even when life speeds up, he understood. Peace isn't about how slowly or quietly things move. It's about flowing with whatever speed is needed, without losing my essential nature. He practiced this during his own busy times, when many tasks demanded his attention, when people needed his help all at once, when life felt overwhelming. He remembered the river in flood. He could move quickly when needed, handle many things at once, but still maintain his flowing quality underneath it all. The third lesson was about obstacles that couldn't be moved around. Sometimes the river encountered massive rocks or steep drops, but instead of stopping, the water found a different way to flow. It might pool for a while, gathering strength, then spill over in a waterfall. Or it might seep through tiny cracks, emerging on the other side as a spring. The river shows me that when I can't go around a problem, I can go through it or over it, the master learned. There is always a way to keep flowing. When grief came to visit him, he didn't try to avoid it or push it away. Instead, he let it be like a steep drop in his riverbed. He allowed himself to pool in the sadness for a time, then let it spill over in tears, flowing onward with a deeper appreciation for life's preciousness. The fourth lesson was perhaps the most beautiful. The master noticed that the river was constantly giving and receiving. It gave water to the roots of trees along its banks. It received rain from the sky and streams from the mountains. It carried seeds from one place to another, helping forests spread. It provided homes for fish and drinking water for animals. The river doesn't hoard its water, the master saw. It doesn't hold back or accumulate. It gives freely and receives gracefully, and because of this, it never runs dry. He began to live this way too. He shared his wisdom freely with students, gave his time generously to those in need, offered his presence openly to anyone who was suffering. And like the river, he found that the more he gave, the more flowed into his life. The river also taught him about patience. Water didn't carve the deep canyon overnight. Drop by drop, year by year, century by century, the gentle flow had shaped the hardest stone. The river was never in a hurry, yet it was always moving toward its destination. This is how real change happens, the master realized. Not through force or speed, but through gentle, persistent flowing, like water wearing smooth the roughest edges. He applied this to his own spiritual practice. Instead of trying to force enlightenment or push himself to transform quickly, he practiced with the patience of flowing water. Each day, each breath, each moment of awareness was like a single drop of water, slowly wearing away the hard edges of his ego, gradually carving out space for deeper peace. As you rest here now, you too can learn from this river wisdom. Feel how your breath wants to flow in and out like a gentle stream. You don't have to control it or make it perfect. Simply let it find its own rhythm, its own pace. Notice how your body naturally knows how to flow into relaxation. Your muscles don't all release at once, like a dam bursting. Instead, they soften gradually, like water finding its level, each part of your body settling into comfort in its own time. Your thoughts, too, can learn to flow like a river. Instead of getting stuck on one worry or problem, let them move through your awareness like leaves floating downstream. Some thoughts will move quickly, others slowly. Some will get caught for a moment on the riverbank of your attention, then continue on their way. You don't have to chase the thoughts or try to stop them. You are the riverbed, and thoughts are just what flows through you. The riverbed doesn't move with each passing current. It provides the space, the direction, the gentle guidance that allows the water to flow. Let your emotions flow this way too. If sadness comes, let it flow through like cool water. If worry arises, let it pass like a swift current. If joy bubbles up, let it sparkle and dance like sunlight on the surface, then continue on its way. The master learned that fighting the flow of his inner life was like trying to stop a river with his hands. It only created turbulence and frustration. But when he relaxed his grip, when he allowed the natural movement of thoughts and feelings, everything began to flow more smoothly. He discovered that he could influence the flow without controlling it. Just as a gentle adjustment to the riverbank can guide water in a new direction, a soft intention or a kind word to himself could guide his thoughts toward peace. Not forcing, just suggesting. Not demanding, just inviting. The river taught him about timing too. Sometimes it was appropriate to flow quickly, like spring water rushing down from melting snow. Sometimes it was right to move slowly, like a deep, wide river meandering through meadows. The key was to flow at the right speed for the situation, not to insist on only one pace. In the evening, when the master was tired, he learned to let his energy flow slowly and deeply, like a river moving through quiet places. In the morning, when life called him to action, he could let his energy flow more quickly, like water tumbling over rocks. This is what your body wants to do now as sleep approaches. Your energy wants to flow more slowly, more deeply. Your breathing wants to become like a slow river, moving through peaceful countryside. Your heartbeat wants to flow like the steady rhythm of water flowing over smooth stones. Let your whole being flow toward rest now. Don't try to force sleep to come quickly, like opening a dam. Let it arrive naturally, like a river finding its way to the sea. Each breath takes you a little further downstream, toward the ocean of deep rest. The river never worries about reaching the sea. It simply flows, trusting that each moment of movement is taking it exactly where it needs to go. You can trust your own flowing towards sleep in the same way. Feel yourself flowing now, gently, naturally, toward the vast, peaceful ocean of dreams. Like the river, you don't need to know the exact path. You only need to keep flowing, keep releasing, keep letting go into the current that is always carrying you home. The master spent 7 years by that river, and it taught him that peace is not a destination, but a way of moving. Not a place to arrive at, but a quality of flowing. Not something to achieve, but something to become. You are flowing now. You have always been flowing. Tonight, you flow into the deepest peace, as natural as water returning to the sea. The master discovered something else during his years by the river. He noticed that the water was never the same from moment to moment. The river looked constant, but it was always changing. New water was always flowing past. What he saw in the morning was completely different water from what he saw in the evening, yet it was still the same river. I am like this river, he realized. My thoughts change, my feelings change, my body changes, but something essential remains constant. I am both always changing and always the same. This understanding brought him great peace. He stopped trying to hold on to good moments or push away difficult ones. Like the river, he learned to let each moment flow by, knowing that his essential nature would remain. He watched how the river responded to different seasons. In winter, when ice formed at the edges, the water didn't fight the cold. It simply slowed down, finding new ways to move. Some parts might freeze completely for a while, but underneath, the flow continued. When spring came, the ice melted naturally, and the full flow returned. Even when I feel stuck or frozen, the master understood, the flow of life continues underneath. I don't have to force the thawing. I can trust that spring will come again. This helped him through his own difficult seasons. When depression clouded his mind like winter ice, he didn't struggle against it or feel guilty about not being peaceful. He simply trusted that underneath the frozen surface, his true nature continued to flow. And always, when the time was right, warmth would return and the ice would melt. The river taught him about sound as well. In the quieter stretches, the water barely whispered as it moved over smooth pebbles. In the rocky areas, it gurgled and laughed as it tumbled over stones. During floods, it roared with power. But whether quiet or loud, fast or slow, the sound was always the sound of flowing. My voice too can have many tones, the master learned. Sometimes I speak softly, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with strength. But whatever tone I use, if it comes from my flowing nature, it will carry truth. He began to notice how different people affected the river's flow. Children would throw stones into the water, creating splashes and ripples. The river received these disturbances without complaint, letting the circles spread outward until the surface was smooth again. Adults often walked by without noticing the water at all, too busy with their thoughts to see the beauty flowing beside them. I can be like this river with people too, he saw. I can receive their energy without being disturbed by it. If someone brings turbulence, I can let it create ripples that spread and then settle. If someone doesn't notice my presence, I can continue flowing in peace. He practiced this with difficult visitors. When someone came to him angry or upset, he didn't try to calm them down or fix their problems. He simply flowed around their disturbance like water around a stone, remaining peaceful while allowing them to be exactly as they were. The river also showed him the beauty of carrying things. Leaves that fell into the water were carried gently downstream. Seeds were transported to new places where they could grow. Even dead branches were moved along, eventually becoming homes for insects and fish in quieter pools. I can carry the gifts people give me, the master realized. Kind words, shared sorrows, moments of joy. I can let these flow through my life and carry them to wherever they need to go. He stopped trying to hold on to beautiful experiences or meaningful conversations. Instead, he let them flow through him like gifts carried by the river. trusting that they would reach exactly the people who needed to receive them. The master also learned about depth from the river. In some places, the water was shallow and clear, every pebble on the bottom visible. In other places, it was deep and mysterious, its depths hidden from view. Both were necessary. Both were beautiful. My own being has shallow places and deep places, he understood. Sometimes my thoughts and feelings are clear and easy to see. Sometimes there are depths I cannot fathom. Both are part of my natural flow. This understanding helped him stop judging himself when his emotions were unclear, or when he didn't understand his own reactions. Like the deep pools in the river, some parts of himself were meant to remain mysterious. He could flow with this mystery, instead of trying to force everything into the light. As the years passed, people began to notice changes in the master. His movements became more graceful, like flowing water. His speech became more natural, flowing at just the right pace for each listener. His presence brought a quality of ease that helped others relax their own resistance to life's natural flow. Students would ask him, "How did you become so peaceful?" He would simply point to the river and say, "I learned to flow." Some students wanted more complex teachings, detailed instructions, specific techniques. But the wise ones understood that the deepest teaching was in the flowing itself. They would sit by the river with him, not talking, just letting the water teach them directly. As you rest here now, let the river's final teaching flow through you. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to achieve, no particular state you need to reach. You are already flowing toward exactly where you need to be. Your breath is flowing perfectly. Your heartbeat is flowing in its own rhythm. Your blood is flowing through your body, carrying life to every cell. Even in stillness, you are constantly flowing. Let sleep come to you like water flowing downhill, naturally, inevitably, without effort. You don't have to make it happen. You only have to stop resisting the natural current that is already carrying you toward rest. Feel yourself flowing now, as gentle as morning mist, as natural as rain returning to the earth, as peaceful as a river finding its way home to the sea. In this gentle flowing toward peace, let me share with you the story of a gardener who discovered something extraordinary. What happens when the boundaries between self and world begin to dissolve? This gardener had spent his whole life tending a small plot of land behind an old temple. Every morning before dawn, he would walk among the rows of vegetables and flowers, pulling weeds, watering seedlings, harvesting what was ready. The work was simple, repetitive, and he loved it deeply. For many years, he took great pride in his garden. "Look at my beautiful tomatoes," he would say to visitors. "See how well my roses are growing." He felt a strong sense of ownership and accomplishment. The garden was his creation, his success, his identity. But as the years passed, something began to shift. The boundaries between himself and his garden started to blur in the most beautiful way. It began one morning when he was watering the bean plants. As he held the hose, watching the water soak into the dark earth, he suddenly couldn't tell where his caring ended and the plants' receiving began. The love he felt for the garden seemed to be flowing both ways, from him to the plants, and from the plants back to him. Strange, he thought. Am I caring for the garden, or is the garden caring for me? The more he worked with this question, the more mysterious it became. When he planted seeds, was he creating new life, or was life creating itself through his hands? When he pulled weeds, was he protecting the vegetables, or were the vegetables teaching him about making space for what truly nourished? Day by day, the sense of separation continued to fade. When he pruned the fruit trees, he began to feel as if the trees were pruning away his own unnecessary branches. Old worries, useless thoughts, parts of his personality that no longer served him. When he composted the kitchen scraps, turning waste into rich soil, he felt his own inner waste being transformed too. Old anger became patience, past hurts became wisdom, fear became fertile ground for courage to grow. The gardener started to lose track of where he ended and the garden began. Was he breathing, or were the plants breathing through him? Was he feeling the morning sun on his face, or was he the sun itself, warming both gardener and garden with the same light? One day, a visitor came to admire the garden. "You must be very proud of what you've created here," she said. The gardener paused in his weeding and looked around. The question felt strange to him now. "I'm not sure I created anything," he said slowly. "I think we all grew together." The visitor looked confused, but the gardener had spoken the truth as he experienced it. He could no longer point to himself as separate from the beans climbing their poles, the sunflowers turning their faces toward light, the earthworms enriching the soil. They were all part of one living, breathing, growing whole. This understanding brought him the deepest peace he had ever known. All his life, he had carried the heavy burden of being someone who had to succeed, someone who might fail, someone who had to figure everything out and make everything work. But now that someone was dissolving like morning mist in sunlight, what remained was not empty nothingness, but fullness beyond description. He was the garden and the gardener, the soil and the seed, the rain and the plant receiving it. When the old sense of self melted away, what emerged was not less, but more. Not loneliness, but connection to everything. Not confusion, but a clarity that came from no longer having to defend any particular point of view. As you rest here now, you too can taste this dissolution of boundaries. Feel how your breath mingles with the air around you. There is no clear line where your lungs end and the atmosphere begins. You are breathing the world, and the world is breathing you. Notice how your body rests on the bed, how the bed supports you. Where do you end and the support begins? Feel how you are held by gravity, by the earth itself. You are not separate from these forces. You are an expression of them. Your thoughts arise from the same source as dreams, as imagination, as the creativity that grows flowers and writes poetry. You don't own your thoughts any more than the gardener owned his garden. They arise, they bloom, they fade, all as part of the natural flow of consciousness itself. The gardener discovered that when he stopped trying to be someone, he became everyone and everything. When he stopped defending his small identity, he expanded into something vast and peaceful. "Who am I?" he would sometimes ask himself playfully as he worked among the plants. "I am the one who asks," he would answer with a smile. "And I am the one who wonders, and I am the wondering itself." This wasn't philosophy to him anymore. It was his lived experience. He had dissolved into life itself, and life had revealed its secret, that there was never really any separation to begin with. The boundaries between self and other, between gardener and garden, between you and the world around you, are like lines drawn on water. They seem real for a moment, but when you look closely, you see they were never actually there. When visitors came to the garden now, they often remarked on the unusual peace they felt there. "There's something special about this place," they would say. The gardener would nod knowingly. The garden had become a place where the illusion of separation had dissolved. Plants, soil, weather, and gardener had merged into one harmonious expression of life loving itself. People began to stay longer, sitting quietly among the vegetables and flowers. Without understanding why, they felt less burdened, less isolated, less anxious. The garden's teaching was spreading to them too, showing them that they had never been as separate as they thought. Children especially loved the garden. They would run between the rows, touching everything, tasting the cherry tomatoes, picking wildflowers, completely at home in the space. The gardener saw that children naturally lived in this state of no separation until the world taught them to build walls around themselves. "Watch the children," he would tell adult visitors. "They show us how to be in the world before we learn to be afraid of it." The seasons taught him even more about this dissolving of self. In spring, when new growth exploded everywhere, he felt his own aliveness expanding. In summer, when everything was lush and abundant, he experienced himself as that same abundance. In autumn, when the plants released their seeds and began to die back, he practiced letting go of everything he thought he knew about himself. In winter, when the garden rested under snow, he discovered the profound peace of not having to be anything at all. "I am spring becoming summer, becoming autumn, becoming winter, becoming spring again," he would say to himself. "I am the wheel turning, not just someone watching it turn." This cyclical understanding helped him with what others called problems. When sadness came, he didn't fight it or try to fix it. He recognized it as autumn in his inner landscape, a natural time of letting go, making space for new growth. When joy arose, he didn't grasp at it or try to make it permanent. He knew it was spring in his heart, beautiful precisely because it was temporary. The gardener's daily work became a form of meditation, each task a practice in forgetting himself and remembering the larger life he was part of. Weeding became a clearing of mental clutter. Watering became a practice of nurturing what wanted to grow. Harvesting became a celebration of life giving itself freely. Even his relationship with time began to change. Clock time felt less important than garden time. The time it takes for seeds to sprout, for fruits to ripen, for seasons to turn. He moved at the pace of growth itself, which was sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always exactly right. Visitors who stayed long enough began to notice their own boundaries softening. They found themselves thinking less about their problems and more about the miracle of photosynthesis happening in every leaf around them. They worried less about their personal futures and marveled more at the way plants knew exactly how to grow toward light. "How did you become so peaceful?" they would ask the gardener. "I stopped being," he would answer simply, "and in that stopping, I became everything." This wasn't a riddle to him. It was the most practical discovery of his life. By releasing his grip on being a separate someone, He had found his way into the peace that was always available, the peace of belonging completely to life itself. As sleep approaches you now, let yourself practice this same gentle dissolution. You don't have to hold on to being anyone in particular tonight. You don't have to maintain any identity or solve any problems or figure anything out. Let yourself melt into the vastness that holds all dreams, all rest, all peace. Feel your individual worries dissolving into the great ocean of consciousness that dreams through every sleeping being. You are not separate from the peace you seek. You are that peace, temporarily forgetting itself in the beautiful game of being human. Tonight, you remember. Tonight, you come home to what you have always been. Like the gardener dissolving into his garden, let yourself dissolve into the infinite tenderness that is cradling you right now. No self to defend, no identity to maintain, just pure awareness resting in its own peaceful nature. The garden of no self is blooming all around you. Welcome home. In his final years, the gardener became something like a living teaching. People would come from far away just to work beside him in silence. They found that in his presence, their own sense of separation began to soften without any effort on their part. He had become like rich soil, not trying to grow anything, but providing the perfect conditions for growth to happen naturally. His very being was an invitation to remember what they had temporarily forgotten about themselves. Sometimes visitors would ask him practical questions. How do you know when to plant? What do you do about pests? How do you make the soil so fertile? But his answers always pointed beyond technique to something deeper. The plants tell me when they're ready, he would say about planting. The garden finds its own balance, he would explain about pests. I just add what life has given back to life, he would say about the soil. These weren't mystical answers to him. They were simply descriptions of how things worked when you stopped trying to control everything from the outside and started listening to the wisdom that was already present. The gardener had learned to trust the intelligence that made seeds sprout and flowers bloom. He had discovered that the same intelligence was operating in his own life, in his own choices, in his own unfolding toward peace. When storms came to the garden, he didn't worry about protecting every plant. He had seen how plants that bent with the wind survived while rigid ones broke. He had learned to bend with the storms in his own life too, trusting that what was meant to survive would find a way. When droughts came, he didn't panic about watering everything perfectly. He had watched how plants sent their roots deeper during dry times, finding sources of nourishment they never knew existed. He did the same during the dry periods of his own life, sending his awareness deeper into the source of peace that never ran out. The garden had taught him that there was a vast intelligence at work in everything, an intelligence that knew exactly how to create and sustain life without any help from his worried mind. The more he relaxed into trusting this intelligence, the more smoothly everything flowed. As you rest here now, you can feel this same intelligence at work in your own body. Your heart knows how to beat without your instruction. Your lungs know how to breathe without your management. Your cells know how to heal and renew themselves without your supervision. This same intelligence knows how to carry you into sleep when you stop trying to force it. It knows how to restore your energy while you rest. It knows how to give you exactly the dreams your mind needs for healing and integration. The gardener's greatest gift was showing people that they could trust this intelligence completely. They didn't have to figure everything out or control every outcome. They could relax into being cared for by the same force that grew gardens and turned seasons and painted sunsets across the sky. In the end, when the gardener's time came to leave his body, those who were with him said it was like watching a flower release its seeds on the wind. There was no struggle, no resistance, just a natural completion of one cycle and the beginning of another. The garden continued to flourish after he was gone, tended now by those he had taught. But they all said the same thing, that somehow he was still there, not as a person, but as the presence that had always been flowing through him. That presence is flowing through you too, right now. It is the awareness reading these words, the consciousness that dreams your dreams, the peace that remains constant underneath all the coming and going of thoughts and feelings. You don't have to become this presence. You already are this presence. You only have to stop pretending to be something smaller and let yourself remember what you have always been. Tonight, as you dissolve into sleep, you dissolve into your true nature. Like the gardener melting into his garden, like a river flowing into the sea, like morning mist returning to the sky. You return to the source from which you never actually departed. Rest in this knowing. Rest in this homecoming. Rest in the garden of no self, where peace blooms eternal. As the sense of separation continues to fade, there is yet another doorway to peace. One found not in action or flowing or dissolving, but in the profound wisdom that lives within silence itself. There was once a young monk who came to study at a temple famous for its ancient bell. This bell was said to carry the most beautiful sound in all the land, a tone so pure and clear that it could awaken enlightenment in anyone who truly heard it. The young monk was eager to hear this miraculous bell. He had traveled many days to reach the temple, leaving behind his family and his old life, convinced that hearing this sacred sound would instantly bring him the peace he sought. On his first morning at the temple, he woke before dawn and waited in the courtyard, listening carefully for the bell to ring. He waited through sunrise, through the morning meal, through the first meditation period, but no bell rang. "When will I hear the famous bell?" he asked an older monk. The older monk smiled mysteriously. "The bell rings constantly," he said. "You simply haven't learned how to listen yet." This puzzled the young monk greatly. He spent the next several days listening even more carefully, straining his ears for any sound that might be the legendary bell. He heard birds singing, wind in the trees, the soft footsteps of monks walking past, but no bell. "I still haven't heard it," he told the older monk after a week of careful listening. "You're listening too hard," came the reply. "The bell rings in silence." "How can a bell ring in silence?" the young monk asked, frustrated. "That makes no sense." The older monk just smiled and walked away. Weeks passed. The young monk began to think he had been tricked, that perhaps there was no special bell at all. He had come so far, given up so much, all to hear something that might not even exist. One evening, sitting alone in the meditation hall after all the other monks had gone to sleep, he felt defeated and sad. "I have wasted my time here," he thought. "I am no closer to peace than when I arrived." In that moment of giving up, of stopping his endless effort to hear something special, a profound silence settled around him. Not the silence that comes from the absence of sound, but a living, vibrant silence that seemed to contain everything. And in that silence, he heard it. Not with his ears, but with his entire being, he heard the bell. It wasn't a sound at all, but something deeper, the very essence of sound, the space from which all sounds arise and to which they return. The bell had been ringing all along, but he had been too busy listening for something else to notice it. It was the silence itself that was singing, the emptiness that was full, the nothing that contained everything. Tears came to his eyes as he realized what the older monk had been trying to tell him. The bell wasn't a physical object that made noise. The bell was the awareness itself, the consciousness that heard all sounds. And that awareness was always present, always ringing with its own pure presence. From that night forward, the young monk heard the bell constantly, not as a sound, but as the aware silence that was always with him. Whether the temple was full of noise or completely quiet, whether he was listening to someone speak or sitting in meditation, the bell was always there, the silent awareness in which all experience arose. As you rest here now, you too can begin to hear this bell. It's not something you need to strain to find or work to create. It's already here, already sounding, already present in the very awareness that is reading these words. Notice the silence between sounds. Right now, there might be distant traffic, or the hum of air conditioning, or the settling of the house around you. But notice that there are also spaces of silence between and underneath these sounds. That silence isn't empty. It's full of presence, full of awareness, full of the same consciousness that the young monk discovered in the temple. It's the bell that has been ringing in you your entire life, but which the mind's chatter usually drowns out. The young monk learned to rest in this silence more and more. He found that it wasn't passive or dull, but incredibly alive and intelligent. All wisdom seemed to arise from this silence. All peace lived within it. When other monks asked him questions, he would often pause before answering, not to think of what to say, but to listen to the silence from which his words would come. Those words, arising from silence, carried a different quality. They were more helpful, more true, more kind. When he faced difficulties or challenges, instead of immediately trying to think his way through them, he would listen to the silence first. Solutions would often arise on their own, not from his thinking mind, but from the deeper intelligence that lived in the quiet. The silence taught him that beneath all the noise of thoughts and worries and plans, there was something incredibly still and peaceful that was never disturbed. This stillness wasn't affected by whether his day was busy or calm, whether his emotions were pleasant or difficult, whether his life was going well or facing challenges. Like the bell that rings without making sound, this stillness was always present, always available, always offering its peace to anyone who remembered to listen. You can hear this bell right now, not by listening harder, but by listening softer, not by trying to find it, but by relaxing into what's already here. Feel the silence that lives in your chest, in your heart area. It's not the absence of your heartbeat, but the spacious awareness in which your heartbeat is happening. This is where the bell rings most clearly. Notice the silence between your thoughts. When one thought ends and before the next one begins, there's a gap, In that gap, the bell is ringing. It's the awareness itself, pure and clear and undisturbed. The young monk spent years learning to live from this silence rather than from the noise of his busy mind. He discovered that when he spoke from silence, his words carried more weight. When he acted from silence, his actions were more effective. When he rested in silence, his rest was deeper. Other monks began to notice a quality in his presence that was both calming and enlivening. Being around him made them feel more peaceful, not because he did anything special, but because he had learned to embody the silence that was their own deepest nature too. "How did you become so still?" they would ask him. "I learned to hear the bell that never stops ringing," he would answer. Some understood immediately. Others, like he had been, were confused by his words. But those who were ready began their own journey of learning to listen for the sound that isn't a sound, the voice that speaks without words. The silence the monk discovered wasn't blank or empty. It was pregnant with infinite possibility. It was the womb from which all thoughts were born, the canvas on which all experiences were painted, the sky through which all clouds of emotion passed. Living from this silence didn't make him detached or withdrawn. Instead, it made him more present, more available, more responsive to what each moment required. Because he wasn't caught up in the noise of his own mind, he could hear what others really needed, could see what was actually happening, could respond with wisdom rather than just reaction. As sleep calls to you now, you can let yourself sink into this same profound silence. You don't have to find it or create it. You only have to stop listening to everything else and notice what's already here. The bell of silence is ringing in your body right now. It's the awareness that experiences your breathing without being the breath. It's the consciousness that feels your heartbeat without being the heart. It's the presence that witnesses your thoughts without being any particular thought. Let yourself rest in this bell-like awareness. Let it ring through your entire being, not as sound, but as presence, not as noise, but as the deepest quiet you've ever known. The young monk learned that this silence was his true home, the place he had been seeking in all his spiritual searching. It wasn't somewhere he had to go or something he had to achieve. It was what he had always been, underneath all the stories and struggles and seeking. Tonight, you too come home to this silence. You rest in the bell that rings without sound, the voice that speaks without words, the presence that has been with you always, waiting patiently for you to remember how to listen. The bell is ringing now. Can you hear it? Not with your ears, but with your heart. Not as sound, but as the very awareness that makes all hearing possible. Rest in this ringing silence. Let it carry you deeper than sleep, into the source from which all rest arises. Chapter 6: The Butterfly's Dream of Freedom. In this deepening silence, there comes a moment when even the one who listens begins to fade, and we discover the ultimate freedom that lies beyond all sense of being anyone at all. There was once a man who had a very strange dream. In this dream, he became a butterfly, not just any butterfly, but one with wings so delicate they seemed made of pure light, so colourful they contained every sunset that had ever painted the sky. As this butterfly, he felt completely free. He had no worries about tomorrow, no regrets about yesterday. He simply flew from flower to flower, tasting nectar that was sweeter than any food he had ever known as a human. The world looked completely different from butterfly eyes, more vibrant, more alive, more magical. He floated on warm currents of air without effort, danced with other butterflies in spirals of pure joy, rested on petals that felt like silk beneath his tiny feet. There was no sense of time, no feeling of being separate from the garden he moved through. He was simply part of the great flowing dance of life. The butterfly had no memory of ever being human. This flying, this lightness, this perfect freedom, this was all he had ever known. The idea that he might be anything other than a butterfly would have seemed impossible. When the man woke up, he felt confused and strangely sad. The heavy feeling of being in a human body felt wrong somehow. The solid walls of his room seemed like a prison after the boundless sky he had known as a butterfly. All day, he couldn't stop thinking about the dream. The memory of flying felt more real than walking. The taste of flower nectar seemed more true than any food he ate. The lightness of being a butterfly felt more natural than the weight of being human. That night, he lay in bed wondering, was I a man dreaming I was a butterfly? Or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am a man? The question haunted him, but not in a troubling way. It opened something in his mind, a doorway to a different way of seeing everything. If he could be so completely a butterfly in the dream that he forgot he was human, and now be so completely human that the butterfly seemed like a dream, then what was he really? Was he the man, the butterfly, or something else entirely? Something that could experience being either one without actually being limited to either one. As the days passed, this question grew into a profound understanding. He began to see that he had been living his whole life as if he really was just a human, with all the heaviness, all the limitations, all the struggles that seemed to come with that identity. But the butterfly dream had shown him something different. It had given him a taste of what it felt like to be free from the weight of being someone particular, someone with a specific history and future, someone with problems to solve and goals to achieve. He started to notice how much energy he spent every day maintaining his sense of being himself, defending his opinions, protecting his image, worrying about what others thought of him, trying to be successful, trying to be good, trying to be worthy. What if, he wondered, I am neither the man nor the butterfly, but the consciousness that can dream of being either one? This thought was like a key unlocking a door he hadn't even known was there. If he was the awareness that could experience being human or being a butterfly, then he wasn't trapped in either identity. He was free in a way he had never imagined possible. He began to experiment with this freedom. When worry arose about his job, he would remember the butterfly who had no career concerns, only the simple joy of flying. When he felt heavy with responsibility, he would recall the lightness of floating on air currents, trusting completely in the wind. When people criticized him, instead of feeling defensive, he would think of the butterfly who was never concerned with others' opinions, who simply was what it was without apology or explanation. Gradually, he learned to live with this butterfly consciousness, even while appearing to be human. He still went to work, still had conversations, still took care of his daily responsibilities. But underneath it all, he carried the memory of ultimate freedom. People began to notice something different about him. There was a lightness in his presence that hadn't been there before. He moved through challenges with less struggle, responded to difficulties with less drama. It was as if he wasn't quite as solid as he used to be, not quite as weighed down by the ordinary heaviness of human life. "You seem so peaceful lately," a friend observed. "What's changed?" He smiled, remembering wings that had never actually existed, but felt more real than his own arms. "I remembered that I can fly," he said simply. His friend laughed, thinking it was a joke. But for him, it was the deepest truth he had ever spoken. As you rest here now, you too can remember your own wings. Not physical wings, but the freedom that comes from realizing you are not trapped in any particular identity, any fixed idea of who you are supposed to be. Feel how light you become when you stop holding on to the weight of being someone specific. What if you are not your name, your job, your history, your problems, your achievements? What if all of these are just dreams you are having, like the man dreaming he was a butterfly? What if you are the dreamer, the consciousness that can experience being anything at all without being limited to any particular form? Let yourself feel this butterfly freedom now. You don't have to carry the heavy burden of your personal story into sleep. You can set it down like clothes at the end of the day, knowing you can pick it up again tomorrow if you choose to. Feel yourself becoming lighter, more free, less solid. Like the butterfly, you can float on currents of breath, drift on waves of relaxation, move through the landscape of dreams without the weight of worrying about who you're supposed to be. The man discovered that this butterfly consciousness wasn't just for dreaming. It was his natural state, hidden underneath years of believing he was only human. When he remembered his true nature, the awareness that could experience anything without being trapped by it, every moment became lighter. Problems that used to feel overwhelming became like clouds that butterflies fly through, temporary, insubstantial, not worth landing on. Emotions that used to knock him down became like wind currents, something to dance with rather than resist. He learned that freedom wasn't about changing his circumstances or solving all his problems. Freedom was about remembering that he was vast enough to contain any experience without being defined by it, light enough to move through any situation without being stuck in it. Just as the butterfly in his dream had no memory of being human, he began to have moments where he forgot about being limited, forgot about being small, forgot about being separate from the beautiful world he moved through. In those moments, there was no difference between himself and the sky, between his awareness and the awareness that bloomed in flowers, between his peace and the peace that rested in mountains and flowed in rivers. The question, am I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I'm a man, had led him to an even deeper question. What if I am the dreaming itself? And in that dreaming, anything was possible. Any identity could be worn like clothing and then removed. Any experience could be had without leaving a trace. Any limitation could be seen through like morning mist dissolving in sunlight. Tonight, as sleep carries you into your own dreams, remember that you are not just the one who sleeps. You are the consciousness in which all sleeping and waking happens. You are not just the one who dreams, but the vast awareness in which all dreams arise and fade. Let yourself fly free tonight, beyond all the boundaries you usually accept, beyond all the limitations you usually carry. You are as free as the butterfly, as vast as the sky it flies through, as timeless as the dreaming that contains all dreams. Feel your wings now, not made of matter, but of pure freedom. Feel how easily you can rise above every concern, float beyond every worry, dance through the night sky of consciousness itself. You are the butterfly. You are the dreamer. You are the dream. And in this infinite freedom, the deepest rest becomes possible. Not the sleep of someone tired, but the rest of consciousness itself, coming home to its own boundless nature. Fly free into this rest. Let the morning worry about whether you were human or butterfly. Tonight, you are simply the freedom that dreams both into being. Chapter 7. The Master of No Words. In this flight toward freedom, we come now to the profound teaching that lives beyond all words, all explanations, all understanding, the wisdom that can only be transmitted through pure presence itself. There was once a teacher who stopped speaking for 20 years. Not because he was angry or sad, not because his voice was damaged, but because he had discovered something that could not be captured in words. This teacher had once been known for his beautiful lectures. Students would travel from distant villages to hear him explain the deepest mysteries of existence. His words were like poetry, flowing with wisdom and insight that could illuminate the darkest confusion. But one morning, as he prepared to give a teaching on the nature of truth, he opened his mouth and nothing came out. Not because he had forgotten what to say, but because he suddenly saw that truth itself was present in the room, alive and obvious, needing no explanation at all. He looked at his students sitting expectantly before him, and he saw that they were already everything they were seeking to become. They were already peaceful beneath their worry, already wise beneath their confusion, already free beneath their sense of being trapped. The words he had planned to speak suddenly seemed like trying to explain water to fish, like describing light to the sun. How do you talk about what is already completely present? How do you point to what is looking through every pair of eyes? So he simply sat in silence. At first, his students waited patiently, thinking he was gathering his thoughts or preparing something special. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still, he sat without speaking, his eyes gentle and clear, his presence radiating a peace that filled the entire room. Some students became restless. "When will the teaching begin?" they whispered to each other. "Why isn't he saying anything?" But a few students began to notice something extraordinary happening in the silence. Without any words being spoken, their minds were becoming quieter. Without any techniques being taught, their hearts were opening. Without any explanations being given, they were understanding things they had never understood before. The teacher sat this way day after day, week after week. Some students left, frustrated by the lack of words, but others stayed, drawn by something they couldn't name but couldn't ignore. Those who remained discovered that being in the teacher's presence was like being near a deep well of peace. Just sitting with him, their own inner noise would settle. Their worries would fade. Their questions would either be answered wordlessly or revealed to be unnecessary. New students would arrive expecting lectures and discussions. "What does the teacher teach?" they would ask the long-term students. "He teaches everything," was the reply. "And he teaches nothing. He just sits, and in his sitting, truth becomes obvious." This made no sense to the newcomers, but those who were patient enough to sit with the master began to understand. His silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant with more wisdom than all the books ever written. His presence wasn't passive. It was actively transmitting something that could never be captured in words. Students began to notice that when they sat with the master, their own need to talk, to explain, to figure everything out would naturally fade. In the space of that silence, a different kind of knowing would emerge. Not knowledge about things, but direct recognition of what they actually were. The master's eyes would sometimes meet those of a student, and in that wordless contact, years of seeking would suddenly make sense. Not through understanding, but through a recognition that was deeper than understanding. A remembering of what had always been true. Some students would sit with him for months without hearing a single word, yet they would leave completely transformed. They had learned not through explanation, but through absorption, not through teaching, but through being, not through words, but through the silence from which all words arise. Years passed this way. The master's reputation spread, but it was a strange kind of fame. People would say, "There is a teacher who teaches without teaching, who speaks without words, who transforms people simply by being present with them." Those who came seeking dramatic experiences or profound revelations were often disappointed. Nothing dramatic happened. No profound words were spoken. There was just an old man sitting quietly, and somehow, in his presence, people remembered something they had forgotten about themselves. As you rest here now, you too can taste this teaching beyond words. Notice how much of your inner chatter is trying to figure things out, trying to understand, trying to get somewhere, or become something. What if you could let all of that effort go? What if you could simply be present, the way the master was present, without needing to know anything, or achieve anything, or understand anything? Feel the space that exists before thoughts form into words. There's an awareness in you that doesn't speak, doesn't explain, doesn't try to make sense of anything. It simply witnesses, simply knows, simply is. This awareness doesn't need words to understand. It doesn't need explanations to be wise. It doesn't need teaching to be complete. It is already everything it needs to be, just as you are already everything you need to be. The master discovered that the deepest truths can't be spoken because they are already being lived. Peace can't be explained because it is already present. Freedom can't be described because it is already what you are. When visitors would ask the master's long-term students, "But what has he actually taught you?" they would struggle to answer. How do you explain that you learned to stop needing explanations? How do you describe what can only be experienced? How do you put into words the discovery that you are already what you were seeking? "He taught us how to sit," one student might say. "He taught us how to be quiet," another would add. But these words seemed too simple to capture what had really been transmitted. The truth was that the master had taught them the most important lesson of all, that you don't need to be taught to be what you already are. You don't need words to know what you already know. You don't need teaching to find what was never lost. In the master's presence, students would sometimes have moments of clarity so profound that they would want to share them, to discuss them, to analyze what had happened. But when they looked into his peaceful eyes, they found that the experience was perfect exactly as it was, needing no commentary, no explanation, no words at all. The silence became their teacher. The presence became their guide. The wordless transmission became more valuable than all the books they had ever read, all the lectures they had ever heard, all the techniques they had ever practiced. Some students realized that they had been carrying a burden they didn't know they had. The burden of thinking they needed to understand everything, figure everything out, explain everything to themselves and others. In the master's silence, this burden simply melted away. They discovered that understanding and not understanding were both just thoughts, and thoughts were just movements in the vast silence of their true nature. They learned that peace wasn't something to achieve, but something to stop disturbing. They found that wisdom wasn't something to acquire, but something to uncover by removing what was covering it. The master never broke his silence, not even in his final moments. His last teaching was the same as his first after the words stopped. Pure presence, pure being, pure awareness radiating the peace that passes understanding. As sleep calls to you now, let yourself receive this wordless teaching. You don't need to understand what's happening. You don't need to figure out how to sleep or how to find peace. You don't need words to guide you into rest. Let yourself sink into the same kind of presence the master embodied, aware but not thinking, present but not efforting, conscious but not commentating. Feel how restful it is to stop trying to put everything into words, to stop needing to understand, to stop requiring explanations for what is already perfectly obvious. Tonight, let silence be your teacher. Let presence be your path. Let the wordless wisdom of your own being carry you into the deepest rest, where nothing needs to be said because everything is already known. In this silence, you are home. In this presence, you are complete. In this wordless peace, you find what you have always been seeking, not through words or understanding, but through the simple, profound act of being what you already are. Chapter 8: The Stone That Carried No Burden. In this wordless peace, there comes a moment of release so profound that all the weight we thought we had to carry simply falls away, and we discover what it means to move through life unburdened. There was once a traveling monk who had developed a strange habit. Whenever someone hurt his feelings, disappointed him, or treated him unfairly, he would find a stone and put it in his traveling bag. "I will carry this," he would say to himself, to remember what they did. Over the years, his bag grew heavier and heavier. He carried stones for the harsh words his teacher had spoken when he was young, stones for the friends who had abandoned him, stones for the promises that were broken, the trust that was betrayed, the love that was not returned. Each stone represented a reason why he couldn't fully trust life, why he had to stay guarded, why peace seemed so difficult to find. The weight of these stones made his daily walking more and more difficult, but he had grown so used to carrying them that he couldn't imagine traveling without them. "These stones are my teachers," he would tell himself. "They remind me not to be naive, not to expect too much from people, not to let my guard down. One day, while walking along a mountain path, his heavy bag caused him to stumble and fall. The stones scattered across the ground, and as he sat there looking at them, something shifted in his awareness. He picked up one of the stones, a smooth grey rock he had been carrying for 15 years. It represented the day his best friend had betrayed a secret, causing him deep embarrassment and pain. As he held the stone, he suddenly saw something he had never noticed before. The stone itself had never been hurt by his friend. The stone had no memory of betrayal. The stone carried no resentment, no anger, no story about what should have been different. The stone was simply a stone, peaceful, complete, unburdened. Strange, he thought. I have been carrying this stone to remember pain, but the stone itself knows nothing of pain. I have been carrying the burden, not the stone. He looked at another stone, this one sharp and black, representing the harsh criticism from a fellow monk years ago. Again, he saw the same thing. The stone had no memory of criticism. It held no hurt feelings. It was simply present, simply itself, simply at peace. One by one, he examined each stone in his collection. Not one of them carried the burden he thought he was preserving. Not one of them held on to the pain he thought was so important to remember. They were all just stones, neutral, peaceful, free. A profound realization washed over him. He had been carrying the weight, not to remember the events, but to maintain his identity as someone who had been wronged. The stones weren't preserving the lessons, they were preserving his suffering. What would happen, he wondered, if I let myself be like these stones, present, but not holding on to what happened to me, aware, but not burdened by the past. For the first time in years, he tried to imagine walking without his collection of grievances. At first, it felt frightening. Without his stories of being hurt, who would he be? Without his reasons to stay guarded, how would he protect himself? But as he sat with this fear, another feeling began to emerge. Lightness, space, a kind of freedom he had almost forgotten existed. He picked up the stone that represented his friend's betrayal and really looked at it. The betrayal had happened 15 years ago. His friend had long since apologized and learned from his mistake. The friendship had been repaired and had grown stronger. Yet here he was, still carrying the weight of that old pain, as if it were happening today. I forgive you, he said to the stone. Not because what happened was okay, but because you have taught me that I don't need to carry you anymore. He set the stone down gently beside the path. One by one, he went through his entire collection. The stone of his teacher's harshness. He had become a teacher himself now and understood the difficulty of guiding stubborn students. The stone of lost love. He had found deeper love since then. The stone of broken promises. He had learned to make his own happiness rather than depending on others. Each stone had a story, but none of the stories needed to be carried forward. They were all complete, all finished, all ready to be released. With each stone he set down, he felt lighter, not just physically, but in his heart, in his mind, in his very being. The weight he had grown so accustomed to carrying began to lift, and he remembered what it felt like to move through the world unburdened. When the last stone was placed beside the path, He stood up and took a step. He almost fell over. He had grown so used to walking with the weight that walking without it felt strange at first. But after a few steps, a huge smile spread across his face. He felt like he could fly. As you rest here now, you too can examine the stones you've been carrying. Feel into your heart and notice. What old hurts are you still holding on to? What disappointments have you been preserving? What betrayals are you still carrying as proof that life is difficult? These experiences happened just as the monk's experiences happened. The pain was real. The hurt was valid. But the question is not whether these things occurred. The question is whether you need to keep carrying them. Like the monk's stones, your painful memories are just neutral events now. They exist in the past, which is not a place, but a thought. The only weight they have is the weight you give them by carrying them forward into each new moment. What would it feel like to set down the stone of that person who betrayed your trust? You don't have to pretend it didn't happen. You don't have to say it was okay. You simply stop carrying it as a burden. What would it feel like to release the stone of that harsh criticism that still echoes in your mind? The words were spoken long ago. They live now only in your memory, only in the weight you've given them. Feel how much energy it takes to carry these old stones. Feel how they make every step heavier, every day more difficult. Notice how they color your view of new people, new situations, new possibilities. The monk discovered something beautiful when he finally released his collection. The lessons from his difficult experiences didn't disappear. The wisdom he had gained didn't vanish. But the weight, the resentment, the guard he held against life, all of that simply fell away. He learned that you can remember what happened without carrying the emotional weight of what happened. You can be wise from your experiences without being burdened by them. You can protect yourself when necessary, without living in constant defense against threats that no longer exist. After releasing his stones, the monk found that people responded to him differently. His lightness was contagious. His freedom from old hurts made space for new joys. His willingness to trust again, despite having been hurt before, opened doors that had been closed for years. "How did you become so peaceful?" other travelers would ask him. "I learned from the stones," he would say with a smile. "They taught me that carrying weight is optional." Some people didn't understand. They thought their pain was important, that their grievances were justified, that forgetting would be a betrayal of their own experience. But the monk had learned the difference between remembering and carrying, between learning from the past and being imprisoned by it. The stones beside the mountain path remained there long after the monk continued his journey. Other travelers would find them and wonder how they came to be there. Some would pick them up and carry them, adding them to their own collections of burden. But others, seeing the stones scattered peacefully by the path, would understand the teaching they represented. They would examine their own bags, their own collections, their own unnecessary weight. And some would choose to add their stones to the pile, walking away lighter than they had been in years. As sleep approaches you tonight, feel yourself becoming like those stones by the path, present but not burdened, aware of what has happened but not weighted down by it, free to rest deeply because you are no longer carrying what belongs to the past. Let your body sink into the bed with the relief of setting down a heavy bag after a long journey. Feel your breath deepen as the weight lifts from your chest. Notice how much space opens up in your heart when it's no longer crowded with old hurts. You don't need to carry your stones into sleep. You don't need to carry them into tomorrow. They can rest beside the path while you rest in peace, unburdened at last. Tonight, you are light. Tonight, you are free. Tonight, you discover what it means to move through the world without the weight of the past, as natural and peaceful as a stone that has never carried anything but its own simple presence. Chapter 9. The Lake of Perfect Reflection. In the quiet valley between two mountains, there was a lake so still that travelers often stopped just to gaze into it. They said it reflected the world more perfectly than any mirror, showing the sky, the trees, even the smallest bird in flight with flawless clarity. But this lake did not always appear so calm. When storms came, its surface thrashed with waves, clouds twisted across its skin, and nothing could be seen clearly. Yet when the storms passed, the waters always returned to stillness. A young monk once journeyed there in search of wisdom. His heart was restless and his mind clouded by endless thoughts. He asked the old master who lived beside the lake, "How can I find clarity when my mind is always disturbed?" The master smiled, picked up a small pebble, and dropped it into the water. Ripples spread out, bending the reflection of the mountains. "This is your mind when you cling to every thought," the master said. "But watch." Together they sat in silence as the ripples widened, softened, and eventually disappeared. The lake became smooth again, and the mountains returned, clear as before. "Do you see?" asked the master. "The lake does not resist the pebble. It simply allows the movement to pass. In time, stillness always returns. Your awareness is the same. Let thoughts pass, and clarity will return by itself." The monk returned every day to watch the lake. One afternoon, as rain began to fall, the surface broke into countless tiny rings. "What about when storms come?" the monk asked. "What about when life is so turbulent that I cannot see clearly at all?" The master pointed to the depths. The surface may dance, but the depths remain unmoved. Clarity is not lost, only hidden. When you rest in the depth of your being, storms no longer trouble you. The monk closed his eyes and felt the truth of this. Even as raindrops fell against his skin, he noticed a deeper stillness within him, untouched by the storm. Over time, the monk began to notice something else. When he was anxious, the lake seemed anxious too. His own tension made every ripple look larger, every disturbance more severe. But when he softened his breath, when he let himself simply watch without grasping, the lake appeared calm, even in rain. He realized that his perception shaped his experience, that the lake had always been still at its core. He had only been looking through clouded eyes. Years passed, and the monk grew older. He came again to the lake at night. The waters were so calm, they reflected the stars, countless and bright, scattered like jewels across the sky. He realized then that stillness reveals not only what is before us, but what has always been above us, hidden in the dark. Even in silence, there is light waiting to be seen. One evening, as he sat by the lake, a traveler joined him. The traveler confessed he was haunted by regret, replaying mistakes from long ago. The monk listened, then led him to the water's edge. He asked the traveler to look at his reflection. At first, the man saw only his face, lined with sorrow. Then the monk tossed a pebble, and the reflection broke apart. "This is how your regrets distort your vision," he said. But wait. When the ripples faded, the man's reflection returned, calmer, clearer. "The past is like the ripple," the monk explained. "It disturbs the surface for a time, but it cannot last. Let it fade, and clarity returns." The traveler wept, realizing he did not need to carry his mistakes forever. The lake had shown him that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is simply allowing the water to clear. As you lie here now, imagine that your own mind is this lake. Thoughts may appear like stones tossed into the water, emotions like raindrops, worries like passing winds. For a time they disturb the surface, but beneath it all, your awareness remains vast, deep, and calm. The surface will smooth again. The reflection will return. Notice how your breath settles as you picture this still water. Each inhale opens space. Each exhale releases turbulence. If a thought arises, let it ripple outward without chasing it. If an old memory appears, let it drift like a cloud across the mirrored sky. Nothing needs to be held onto. Nothing needs to be resisted. The lake does not judge what it reflects. Whether mountain or storm, sunrise or night sky, it welcomes all equally. In the same way, you can let your awareness hold every passing thought and feeling without pushing it away or clinging to it. Just notice, just allow, and then let it pass. Sometimes, the monk would rise before dawn and sit by the lake as the world awakened. Mist drifted across the surface, veiling everything in softness. Slowly, as the sun lifted, the mist burned away and the reflection returned. The monk saw in this a teaching. Clarity is always present, even when hidden from view. Just because we cannot see clearly in the moment does not mean clarity has disappeared. It waits for the right conditions to reveal itself. So too with your own heart. Perhaps now it feels clouded with worry or veiled by sorrow. Yet clarity waits quietly beneath, ready to reveal itself when you are still enough to notice. You do not need to force the mist to lift. You only need to wait, gently, patiently, breathing into the stillness until the reflection comes back. Feel yourself resting now, like the depths of the lake, still, clear, untouched by the surface. Whatever movement arises, it belongs only to the surface. You are deeper than that. You are the stillness that waits beneath every ripple. As you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself gazing into the perfect reflection of that lake. The water is smooth, the stars are shining, and everything is clear. No burden to carry, no storm to resist, no effort to make. Just a vast stillness, holding the whole world in its calm embrace. Tonight, you are that stillness. Tonight, your mind reflects without judgment. Tonight, you rest as the lake rests, clear, calm, and endlessly at peace. Chapter 10. The Return to Original Nature. As the reflection of the lake faded from the monk's eyes, he rose slowly and began to walk the path that wound away from its shores. The stillness of the water lingered within him, not as something separate, but as a quiet truth he could now carry wherever he went. Step by step, he realized the journey was leading him not outward to new discoveries, but inward, back to a home he had never truly left. He remembered all the teachings he had gathered, the overflowing cup that showed him the wisdom of emptiness, the mountain that revealed stability, the river that whispered of flow, the garden where self dissolved, the bell that rang in silence, the butterfly that taught freedom, the teacher of no words, the stones he finally released, and the lake reflecting everything with clarity. Each story had pointed in the same direction, like lanterns guiding him through the night. And now, as the lanterns faded, he saw where they had been leading him all along, to his own original nature. The monk recalled the eagerness of his youth when he thought the way would be found in distant places and extraordinary experiences. He had believed wisdom was something to be earned, something hidden, something given by others. But with the years, he came to see that all the lessons had been echoes of what was already inside him. The journey was never about becoming something new. It was about remembering what he had always been. As he walked, he thought of a story his first teacher once told him. There was a man who searched everywhere for his keys. He overturned cushions, emptied drawers, and ran through the house in frustration. At last, when he sat down to rest, he felt something in his pocket. The keys had been with him the whole time. The monk smiled, realizing that enlightenment was like those keys. The searching, the striving, the urgency, all had been chasing something already carried within. When he reached the top of the ridge, he paused to look out over the valley. The mountains stood quietly, as they always had. Rivers carved their way through the land. The lake shimmered faintly in the distance. Nothing had changed, and yet everything seemed new. He understood the old saying at last. Before awakening, mountains are mountains, and rivers are rivers. During the search, mountains are no longer mountains, and rivers are no longer rivers. But after awakening, mountains are mountains again. The world had not transformed. His way of seeing it had. The monk felt no need to chase further questions. He no longer needed to compare, to measure, to demand answers from the silence. Everything was complete as it was. A bird took flight across the sky, its wings flashing in the sun. That, too, was enough. As you rest here now, you may notice something similar stirring within you. Perhaps you have carried many questions, many burdens, many ideas about who you are supposed to be. Perhaps you have sought peace in books, in practices, in endless effort. Yet tonight, as you lie in stillness, you may discover what the monk discovered, that peace is not something to be found, it is something to be remembered. Let yourself remember now. Beneath every thought is a silence that has always been here. Beneath every striving is a stillness that has never been disturbed. Beneath every identity is a presence that does not need to be earned or proven. This is your original nature, the simple being that rests before thought, before memory, before expectation. The monk continued down the ridge until he came to a meadow. The grass swayed in the evening breeze, and children from a nearby village were chasing each other through the fields. Their laughter carried lightly on the air, bright and effortless. He paused to listen. He realized this laughter was the sound of his own heart before it learned to worry. It was the freedom of being alive without needing reasons. It was the return to innocence that had never been lost, only covered by years of striving. He sat in the meadow and closed his eyes. Within, he felt the same laughter rising, not as noise, but as lightness. The burdens he had carried fell away like autumn leaves drifting from a tree. In their place was a vast simplicity, a presence that needed nothing. For the first time in his life, he felt truly at home. As you breathe gently now, notice this home within yourself. It is not a place you must travel to. It is not a state you must force. It is here, in the rhythm of your breath, in the softness of your body sinking into rest, in the awareness that holds everything effortlessly. This is what you have been searching for without knowing it. The monk lay back in the meadow, the sky stretching wide above him. Stars emerged one by one, filling the night with silent brilliance. He felt no separation between himself and the stars, no barrier between his body and the earth, no division between seeker and sought. He was not trying to hold on to the moment. He was simply resting in it, as naturally as a child rests in its mother's arms. Sleep came to him like a gentle tide, carrying him into the depths of silence. Not a sleep of escape, but a sleep of return, a homecoming to the essence of being itself. As we continue this journey deeper into peace, let me share with you the story of a man who discovered that sometimes the greatest abundance comes from catching nothing at all. There was an old fisherman who came to the lake every single day at dawn. He would sit on the same weathered log, cast his simple line into the still water, and remain there until sunset. This had been his routine for over 20 years. What made this fisherman unusual was not his dedication, but his complete lack of success. In all those years, he had never caught a single fish, not one. The lake was full of fish. Other fishermen would come and leave with baskets full of their catch. But this old man's hook always came up empty. Yet he was the happiest person in the entire village. This puzzled everyone who knew him. Children would gather around and ask, "Why do you keep fishing if you never catch anything?" Neighbors would shake their heads and whisper, "Poor old man, he doesn't realize he's wasting his time." But the fisherman would just smile peacefully and continue watching his line disappear into the clear water. One day, a successful businessman from the city came to the lake for a vacation. He noticed the old fisherman sitting in his usual spot and watched him for several hours. No fish bit. The line remained perfectly still. Yet the old man seemed perfectly content. Finally, the businessman couldn't contain his curiosity. He walked over and said, "Excuse me, sir. I've been watching you all morning. You haven't caught anything. Doesn't that frustrate you?" The fisherman looked up with eyes so clear and peaceful, they seemed to reflect the lake itself. "Oh," he said with a gentle laugh, "I'm not fishing for fish." "What do you mean?" the businessman asked, confused. "You have a fishing rod. You're sitting by a lake. What else would you be fishing for?" The old man gestured to the water, the sky, the trees reflected on the surface. "I'm fishing for peace," he said simply, "and I catch it every single day." The businessman stood there, not understanding. "But what's the point of fishing if you don't catch fish? Aren't you wasting your time?" The fisherman was quiet for a moment, his line still motionless in the water. Then he spoke softly. "Young man, let me ask you something. When you go to work every day, what are you catching?" "Money, success, achievement," the businessman replied immediately. "And are you happy?" The businessman paused. He thought about his rushed mornings, his stressful meetings, his constant worry about deadlines and profits. "Well, no, not really. But that's just how life is." "Ah," said the fisherman, "you catch many things, but peace is not one of them. I catch nothing that others can see, but I am filled every day." The businessman sat down on the grass nearby, something about the old man's presence making him want to stay. "But how can you be satisfied with nothing?" The fisherman smiled. "Watch the water with me for a while. Tell me what you see." So they sat together in silence. At first, the businessman saw nothing but an empty lake. His mind raced with thoughts of all the things he should be doing, all the calls he should be making. But gradually, as the minutes passed, he began to notice things he had never seen before. The way the morning light danced on the water like scattered diamonds. The gentle ripples that spread outward when a dragonfly touched the surface. The perfect reflection of clouds drifting slowly across the sky. The sound of wind moving through the reeds, like the earth itself breathing. "I never noticed," the businessman whispered. "It's beautiful." "This is what I catch every day," the fisherman said. "Beauty, peace, the feeling of being completely here, completely now. I cast my line not to pull something from the water, but to connect myself to this moment." As the day went on, the businessman found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The old fisherman didn't talk much, but his presence was like a calm lake itself, peaceful, deep, reflecting everything without being disturbed by anything. Other people came and went. Some caught fish, others didn't. But the businessman began to see that the ones who caught fish were often tense, worried about their technique, frustrated when fish didn't bite. They were so focused on the result that they missed everything else. The old fisherman, meanwhile, was receiving gifts constantly. A hawk circled overhead, and he watched it with the same attention others gave to fish. A family of ducks swam by, and he smiled at their gentle conversation. The sun moved across the sky, painting the water in different colors, and he absorbed each changing moment like nourishment. "You're not fishing for fish," the businessman said as understanding dawned. "You're fishing for life itself." "Now you see," the fisherman nodded. "I come here not to take something from the lake, but to give myself to it. And in that giving, I receive everything I need." The businessman stayed until sunset. When it was time to go, he felt more rested than he had after any vacation, more peaceful than he could remember being. "Thank you," he said. "I think I understand now." "What do you understand?" the fisherman asked as he wound up his line. "That you can't catch peace the way you catch fish. Peace catches you when you stop trying so hard to catch other things. As you rest here now, you too can learn from this fisherman's wisdom. Notice how much effort you put into trying to catch sleep, trying to catch relaxation, trying to catch the perfect state of mind. What if, instead of trying to catch these things, you simply cast your line into the present moment and let yourself be caught by peace? Feel yourself settling by the lake of this moment. You don't need to catch anything. You don't need to achieve any particular state. You can simply be here, like the fisherman, open to whatever this moment wants to give you. Let your breathing become like watching the gentle movement of water. Each breath comes and goes without your effort, like ripples moving across a lake. You're not trying to breathe perfectly. You're simply letting breath happen, the way the fisherman let peace happen. Feel your body sinking into the bed like the fisherman sinking into his spot by the water. You've found your place. This is where you belong right now. There's nowhere else you need to go, nothing else you need to do. The fisherman discovered something that changed his whole life. He learned that there's a difference between being busy and being present, between achieving and receiving, between catching and being caught. When you try to catch sleep, it often swims away. But when you simply rest in the attempt, when you find peace in the process itself, sleep comes naturally, like the evening settling over the lake. Other villagers eventually began to understand the fisherman's wisdom. Some started joining him by the lake, not to fish for fish, but to fish for the same peace he had found. They discovered that the lake gave different gifts to each person. To some it gave stillness, to others clarity, to others simply the joy of being alive in a beautiful world. The fisherman taught them all the same lesson. Abundance isn't about what you catch. It's about how deeply you can receive what's already being given. Tonight, you are like that fisherman. You have cast your line into the waters of rest, not to catch anything specific, but to connect yourself with the peace that is always flowing around you and through you. You don't need to catch sleep. Let sleep catch you. You don't need to achieve relaxation. Let relaxation find you here, open and ready, like a patient fisherman who knows that the greatest gifts come not from grasping, but from simply being present to receive what wants to be given. The lake is still, the line is cast, and in this perfect stillness, everything you truly need is already here, already yours, already flowing into your open and peaceful heart. Following this path of finding abundance in simplicity, let me tell you about a single flame that illuminated an entire monastery and taught a profound lesson about the nature of giving and receiving. There was once a great monastery nestled high in the mountains, home to hundreds of monks who devoted their lives to meditation and study. The monastery was famous for its beautiful evening prayers, when thousands of candles would be lit throughout the halls, creating a warm golden glow that could be seen for miles. One winter night, a terrible storm struck the mountains. The wind howled through the corridors, and rain poured through every crack and opening. By morning, every single candle in the monastery had been extinguished. Everyone, except for a small, humble candle that burned quietly in the meditation hall. This candle was nothing special to look at. It was made of simple beeswax, not particularly large or beautiful. It had been burning for days in the corner of the hall, so ordinary that most monks barely noticed it. But somehow, protected by its quiet corner, it had survived the storm that extinguished all the others. The head monk discovered this lone flame during his morning walk through the dark halls. All around him was darkness. The kitchen was dark. The library was dark. The sleeping quarters were dark. But in the meditation hall, this single candle continued to burn steadily, its small flame dancing peacefully as if nothing had happened. "Well," said the head monk to the candle, "it looks like you're all we have left." The candle, of course, said nothing. It simply continued to burn, casting its gentle light in a circle around itself. Soon, other monks began to gather in the meditation hall, drawn by the only light in the entire monastery. They brought their own candles, cold, dark, waiting to be lit again. The first monk held his candle to the flame of the surviving candle. Instantly, his candle came alive with light. But the original candle didn't grow dimmer. Its flame remained exactly as bright as before. This surprised the monks. They were used to thinking that when you give something away, you have less of it. If you share your food, you have less food. If you give away your money, you have less money. But this candle seemed to be giving away its light without losing any of its own. The second monk lit his candle from the first monk's flame. Now there were 3 candles burning, but the original candle still burned just as brightly as when it was alone. Word spread through the monastery about the candle that could share its light without diminishing. Monks came from every corner of the building, each carrying their own unlit candle. One by one, they lit their candles from the original flame. 10 candles became 20. 20 became 50. 50 became 100. The original candle continued to burn with the same steady brightness, as if it had infinite light to share. As the hours passed, the monks began to notice something remarkable. Not only was the original candle not growing dimmer, but the entire monastery was growing brighter. The light from all the candles began to reflect off the walls, off the windows, off each other, creating a warmth and brightness that seemed even greater than what they had known before the storm. The young novice monks were amazed. "How is this possible?" they asked their teachers. "How can the candle give away its light to so many others without losing any of its own?" The older monks smiled. "This is the nature of true giving," they explained. "Some things multiply when they are shared rather than diminish." As the day continued, more and more candles were lit throughout the monastery. The kitchens glowed again. The library was filled with warm light. The sleeping quarters were cozy and bright. Every single candle in the monastery had been relit, all from that one small flame that had survived the storm. But the most amazing thing was this: the original candle still burned just as brightly as it had when it was alone in the dark. It had lit 1,000 other flames, and yet it was completely unchanged. It had given everything and lost nothing. That evening, during their prayers, the monks reflected on what they had witnessed. The head monk spoke to the assembled community. "Today we learned something important from our small teacher in the corner," he said, gesturing to the original candle, which still burned peacefully in its place. "We learned that some gifts increase when they are shared. Light is one of these gifts. Love is another. Peace is another. Wisdom is another." The monks nodded, understanding beginning to dawn in their hearts. This candle showed us that we don't need to hoard our inner light out of fear that we'll have less for ourselves. When we share our peace with others, we don't become less peaceful. When we offer our love, we don't have less love. When we give our wisdom, we don't become less wise. As you rest here now, you can feel this same truth in your own being. Notice the awareness that is reading these words, the consciousness that is present right now. This awareness is like that candle. It can illuminate thousands of thoughts, feelings, and experiences without ever being diminished. Your peace is like that candle's light. You can share it with everyone around you, your family, your friends, even strangers you meet, and still have exactly the same amount of peace for yourself. In fact, the more you share it, the brighter it tends to become. Feel the gentle light of awareness that shines in your chest, in your heart area. This light has been burning steadily your entire life, through every storm, every difficulty, every dark night. Like the monastery candle, it has never gone out. This inner light doesn't need to be protected or hoarded. It doesn't grow dimmer when you let it shine. You can let it illuminate your whole body right now, bringing relaxation and warmth to every part of yourself. Let this light glow in your forehead, releasing any tension there. Let it shine in your jaw, softening any tightness. Let it flow down into your shoulders, melting away the weight they've been carrying. The candle taught the monks that giving and receiving are not opposite forces, but part of the same flow. When the candle gave its light to other candles, it was also receiving something. The joy of fulfilling its purpose, the satisfaction of sharing what it was meant to share. You too have light that is meant to be shared. Your natural peace, your inherent wisdom, your capacity for love. These are not scarce resources that you need to ration carefully. They are infinite qualities that grow stronger when they are expressed. Even as you rest here tonight, your peaceful presence is a gift to the world around you. Your deep breathing, your relaxed body, your quiet mind. All of these contribute to the overall peace of your household, your neighborhood, your community. The monks discovered something else about the candle's teaching. They realized that before the storm, they had taken their abundance of light for granted. They had hundreds of candles, but they had stopped noticing how precious each flame was. The storm had stripped everything away except for the essential light, and in that simplicity, they had rediscovered the miracle of illumination itself. Sometimes life strips away our external sources of comfort and security, like the storm extinguishing all the candles. But there is always an inner light that cannot be extinguished, a core of peace that survives every storm. In the weeks that followed, the monks developed a new ritual. Each evening, they would begin their prayers by lighting all their candles from that original flame, the one that had survived the storm. This reminded them daily that all light comes from the same source, that all peace flows from the same well, that all love springs from the same infinite heart. The candle itself never seemed to take any credit for its gift. It simply continued to burn day after day, sharing its light with anyone who approached with an unlit candle. It asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to be what it naturally was, a source of light. This is the deepest teaching of the candle. You don't need to try to be peaceful or loving or wise. You already are these things. You only need to stop hiding your light under the bushel of worry, fear, and self-doubt. Tonight, as sleep approaches, let yourself be like that candle. Simply burn with your natural light. Simply rest in your inherent peace. Simply allow your innate wisdom to illuminate the path from waking to sleeping. You don't need to work at being peaceful. Peace is what you are when you stop working at being something else. You don't need to achieve relaxation. Relaxation is what happens when you stop preventing it. Let your inner light burn steadily and gently as you drift towards sleep. This light will remain burning even when your conscious mind rests. It will illuminate your dreams and keep you connected to the source of all peace. Like the candle that lit 1,000 flames, Your peaceful rest tonight sends ripples of calm into the world around you. You are contributing to the light of consciousness itself, adding your flame to the eternal fire that burns in the heart of all beings. Rest now in this knowing. You are the light that cannot be extinguished. You are the flame that shares without diminishing. You are the peace that grows brighter the more it is given away. Let yourself sink into this return. Let the mind grow soft, like grass under a warm wind. Let the breath become slow, like ripples fading on a pond. Let the heart grow spacious, like the night sky opening to endless stars. You do not need to grasp. You do not need to resist. You are already home. Rest now in your original nature, the part of you that has never been lost. The child's ease, the stillness beneath storms, the clarity beneath confusion. All of it lives within you now, waiting for nothing but your willingness to remember. Sleep rises within you not as something earned, but as something given freely, like rain falling on the earth, like light returning at dawn. It comes because you have always belonged to it. Tonight, you return to yourself. Tonight, you remember your home. Tonight, you rest in your original nature, whole, free, and complete.